is still a profoundly moving statement of our values. It has never been more relevant than it is now.
The clearest, most verifiable money in this story is the public funding system, because it's audited and published every year rather than rumored. The sovereign grant, the government payment that funds the monarch's official household, rose to £132.1 million for 2025 to 26, the first increase since 2021 to 22, with the rise benchmarked against Crown Estate revenue under the formula set out in the relevant legislation. That figure was formally determined by the royal trustees, and the report explains exactly how it was calculated. The percentage of Crown Estate profits used in the formula was cut from 25% to 12% to account for an expected jump in Crown Estate income from offshore wind leasing. Of the total, £72.1 million is the core grant that funds day-to-day household running costs, while roughly £60 million is ring-fenced for the ongoing Buckingham Palace resurfacing programme, a decade-long infrastructure overhaul. Looking ahead, the grant is set to rise again to £137.9 million for 2026 to 27 before resetting to a lower £99.9 million annually for 2027 to 2032, once the palace works are finished. In a genuine transparency move, Buckingham Palace also published the King's personal tax bill for the first time, showing £11.7 million paid in 2023 to 24 and £12.9 million in 2024 to 25. Separate from the sovereign grant, William and Charles each draw income from a hereditary estate. The Duchy of Cornwall, formed in 1265, holds about 53,000 hectares of land mostly in southwest England and is now worth roughly £1.1 billion. William, who holds it as Prince of Wales, received £22.9 million in net revenue from it in 2024 to 25. Royal family members keep duchy profits personally and aren't required to disclose how the money is spent, though since 1993 the monarch and heir have voluntarily paid income tax on duchy profits and personal investment income, not on the sovereign grant itself. Where the Sussexes actually fit into this system is the part that's most often distorted in speculative content, so it's worth being precise. Before stepping back from royal duties, Harry and William were both funded from the Duchy of Cornwall, with the two couples sharing a pot that stood at about $6.1 million in 2020. When Charles became king, the duchy passed to William, who now receives the full annual sum on his own, nearly $30 million in the 2023 to 24 tax year, far more than either brother had access to as working royals, while Harry stopped being paid from duchy funds after an initial transitional payment in 2020 to 21. There's no published audited figure for exactly what Harry was given on departure. The often cited payout comes from royal biographers reporting rather than an official disclosure, and outlets are careful to frame it as such. On housing, the facts are more concrete. Frogmore Cottage, a property on the Crown Estate near Windsor, was given to Harry and Meghan as a residence by Queen Elizabeth II in 2019 and renovated at a reported cost of about £2.4 million, initially funded through the sovereign grant. After they stepped back as working royals in 2020, Harry repaid that renovation cost in full, a detail confirmed across multiple outlets and one of the few financial figures in this saga that's genuinely well documented on the record. In early 2023, the couple were asked to vacate Frogmore Cottage, with reporting at the time linking the property's next use to Prince Andrew, though Andrew ultimately moved to Sandringham instead. Frogmore Cottage has sat empty since, and as of recent reporting the Crown Estate has been considering plans to subdivide it back into staff housing. Security is the dispute with the most actual paper trail, because it went through real courts rather than anonymous estate meetings. In 2020, the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures, REVEC, decided that Harry's family would receive UK security on a case-by-case basis rather than automatically, and separately rejected his offer to personally pay for police protection. Harry challenged this in court. A High Court judge ruled that REVEC hadn't treated him unfairly, finding his sense of grievance, however genuine, didn't amount to a legal basis for overturning the decision. On appeal in 2025, the Court of Appeal unanimously upheld that ruling, with the presiding judge calling the original decision-making sensible given that Harry was effectively moving in and out of the protected group depending on whether he was in the UK. The result is a bespoke arrangement. The family must give advance notice of UK visits, and protection is assessed case by case based on travel plans and threat assessment, rather than automatic. After losing, Harry said publicly that his father wasn't speaking to him because of the legal fight, adding, "I don't know how much longer my father has, but it would be nice to reconcile." Harry's own statement argued the process should apply the same standard risk assessment protocols used for others, rather than tying his security to having an official royal role. On the personal relationship between Charles and Harry specifically, the most concrete recent fact is an absence rather than an event. During Charles's state visit to the US, there was no meeting scheduled with Harry or Meghan, despite a packed itinerary including an address to Congress and a state dinner. Reporting attributes this primarily to the visit's structure. It was a state visit organized around UK government priorities rather than personal family ones, rather than to any single dramatic confrontation, though it sits alongside the broader, well-documented rift. A few things worth flagging about how this whole topic gets covered. A meaningful amount of what circulates about the Charles-Harry relationship and royal money comes from royal biographies and books written by veteran royal correspondents, which rely on unnamed palace sources and senior royal household quotes that can't be independently verified, even when the books themselves are taken seriously by mainstream outlets. That's different from court rulings and published financial reports, which are public documents anyone can read. When you separate the two, the genuinely solid facts are the sovereign grant figures and how they are calculated, the duchy income figures, the Frogmore renovation repayment, and the Ravec court rulings and their reasoning. Everything involving inner feelings, private dinners, or unnamed advisors reading clauses aloud in sealed rooms. The texture that speculative YouTube content runs on sits in a different category of reliability entirely, and reputable outlets are generally careful to flag it as such or attribute it explicitly to a named book or source rather than presenting it as established fact. It's worth being honest about why this genre exists. It's profitable, and the profitability explains every formal choice in the script. Long-form narration content moneizes on watch time, and dramatic, emotionally charged narratives about a small set of extremely famous, photogenic people reliably hold attention for 15, 20, 30 minutes. The royal family is close to ideal raw material for this, globally recognized faces, an actual ongoing real-world conflict between real siblings that has been partially public for years, and an institution whose internal workings are genuinely and legitimately opaque, which means almost any invented detail is, by design, unfalsifiable in the short term. Nobody at the channel needs sourcing because nobody watching can check. The economics push toward volume over accuracy. A channel can produce a new shocking decision video every few days because the underlying claims require no actual reporting, no verification, no risk of a source drying up. Real investigative journalism about royal finances takes months and produces maybe a handful of solid stories a year. A speculative content mill can produce dozens in the same period, because it isn't reporting anything, it's writing fan fiction with a press release register. There's also a quieter incentive at work, parasocial engagement. Viewers who already feel emotionally invested in these public figures, protective of one, suspicious of another, get a steady supply of content that confirms whichever emotional narrative they already prefer. A pro-Harry viewer and a pro-William viewer can watch videos from the same channel, or rival channels using the same formula, each one engineered to validate a different side, neither one grounded in anything that actually happened. It's tempting to treat this as harmless entertainment. Surely everyone watching knows it's speculation. But there are real costs. The first cost is to the people being written about. These are real adults and real children whose names, motives, and private emotional lives are being fabricated at scale for profit, with no input from them and no correction mechanism. A child being scripted as feeling the shadow of the crown is a real child. An invented family rift attributed to a real living man's betrayal is a claim about an actual person's character, stated as fact, that he never made and may have no realistic way to rebut, because rebutting a YouTube video nobody can quite pin down as a specific claim is much harder than rebutting a named newspaper story. The second cost is to the audience's ability to tell apart what's known from what's invented. The genre borrows journalism's authority, calm narration, dates and timestamps, words like confirmed and documented, without doing any of journalism's actual work, which is sourcing, verification, and accountability for getting it wrong. Every successful video in this style slightly erodes the distinction between those two things for everyone who watches it, because the formal cues that used to signal this has been checked no longer reliably mean that. The third cost is more diffuse. It crowds out the much smaller amount of real reporting on these topics. Genuine stories about royal finances, trusts, and family tension do exist, and they are often more interesting and more carefully sourced than the speculative version. But they get buried under an enormous volume of higher drama, lower effort content optimized purely for watch time. A few practical questions help cut through the formula. whether the subject is a royal family, a celebrity, or anyone else. Ask whether anything in the video could have actually been witnessed and reported by a real, named source, not an advisor, not those who were there, but someone with a name, a title, a documented relationship to the events described. If the answer is no, the video is describing a scene nobody can verify happened at all. Ask whether the video ever claims to know what someone felt, thought, or meant by a gesture, rather than what they said or did. Feelings and unspoken meanings are the easiest thing to invent and the hardest thing to ever actually know about another person, and a script that leans heavily on them is leaning on fiction. Ask whether the same 2 or 3 claims keep getting restated in new language across the runtime. If a 20-minute video could be lawlessly compressed into 2 sentences of actual new information, the other 18 minutes are dramatization, not reporting. And ask, simply, whether you'd believe this story if it were about ordinary people you knew rather than famous ones. The format works partly because audiences extend a kind of narrative trust to stories about celebrities that they'd never extend to a stranger telling them a detailed, emotionally specific account of a private conversation between 2 named neighbors that nobody else witnessed. None of this is really about the royal family specifically. The same formula gets applied to actors, athletes, tech executives, and politicians, and it will keep working as long as platforms reward watch time over accuracy and as long as audiences keep mistaking confident narration for confirmed fact. The royal family is just an unusually clean case study, because the institution's genuine secrecy gives the genre an almost frictionless supply of plausible-sounding blanks to fill in. The honest version of this story, that a real family has real, partially public tensions,